Hello and welcome to something a little bit different. This series is an offshoot of Manny Man Does History. This is Manny Man Does Lore, and it is looking at presenting fictional history and lore presented in a similar way to my history videos. Star Wars and Lord of the Rings lore was actually what got me into history, funnily enough. I loved poring over the old maps and timelines of their histories, and as I got older I began to really discover the same love for real-world history. But I never lost the love for the fictional stuff. I love alternate histories and parallel histories like the Metal Gear Solid series, as you may have noticed from my many Metal Gear Solid references throughout my videos. But I figured a great lore to start off with would be something that a lot of people are starting to ask about, unless this is like 2024 and we're already 2 years into the Lord of the Rings Amazon show and people are as familiar with Middle-earth lore the way they were with the family trees of the Targaryens and the Starks. But anyway, so here we have the creation and dawn of Middle-earth, as created by J.R.R. Tolkien. The cool thing about Middle-earth is that it is written as an alternate history of our world, as a mythology. It's a fictional point in ancient history, assuming that Middle-earth would later change and turn into the world we know today. Tolkien actually wrote it as a mythology for England, trying to imagine the mythology the Anglo-Saxons of England would have had before their culture was heavily conquered by the Normans in 1066. So a lot of their old stories were lost. Tolkien was a professor in Anglo-Saxon in Oxford and an uber geek, so this is what he came up with throughout his life. In fact, much of his work on the first age of Middle-earth was left unfinished when he died in 1973, leaving his son Christopher Tolkien to pull a lot of it together, becoming the Silmarillion, and loads of other books containing different drafts of the work. So, the dawn of Middle-earth itself is even before the First Age. This video will bring us all the way up to the awakening of the Elves, which still isn't even the beginning of the First Age. So, in the beginning, there was Eru Ilúvatar, which is essentially God, and Ilúvatar created the Ainur, the Holy Ones, of which you had the Maiar and the more powerful Valar, who are essentially the pantheon of various deities. So Tolkien got to have his monotheism, with Ilúvatar being the one true god, but also got to have his polytheism with the Valar. Tolkien was a very devout Catholic, which is essentially the polytheism of Christianity, with all the different saints to pray to for different things. So the Valar begin making this music known as the Ainulindale, which begins to show them a vision of the world, and in this vision they see the awakening of the elves, the awakening of men and of the world. But one of the Valar, Melkor, began making his own tune against everybody else. Guess who's the bad guy? They all got annoyed with him, and then the vision ended, and Eru Ilúvatar told them all to go down and create the world they saw in this vision. So they all went down to the world, which was called Arda, and they began to make things, build mountains, form land and sea. But of course Melkor would break and ruin things that they built, because he's nice like that, leading to the first war between the Valar and Melkor. Around this time, Melkor got some Maiar spirits on his side too, such as the spirit Sauron, which some of you may have heard of from later stories. Eventually, Tulkas, a fearsome warrior spirit, descended from the heavens, and Melkor ran away beyond the walls of night, which is essentially like beyond the black of space, so it was very far away. And so Aule, one of the Valar who loved to build stuff, built these great lamps to light the world, built upon the large continent in the middle of the earth. And the Valar settled on an island in the middle of the world called Almaren, and these were the years of the lamps. Melkor, of course, secretly returned and raised his iron mountains and dug the deep pits of Autumno, one of his first bases of operations in Arda. He eventually destroyed the Great Lamps, throwing Arda into turmoil and changing its very geography. One of the Valar, Yavanna, put all the growing life into a deep sleep while Melkor rampaged. The Valar fled to the western continent of Aman and raised the Pelori, massive mountains which would hopefully protect against Melkor. There, Yavanna created the two trees of Valinor, Telperion and Laurelin, which gave off a great light but left most of the earth in the middle in darkness. Most of the Valar stayed in Valinor, except for Orome, the hunter, who hunted Melkor's monsters across the dark Middle-earth. Melkor raised the Heatheglir, the misty mountains across Middle-earth, to disrupt Orome's hunt. The Valar were super excited about the awakening of the elves, which they had foreseen in their initial musical vision. Aule the smith was so enthusiastic, he made his own people, the dwarves. But Eru Ilúvatar did not like this. This was not part of the plan. So Ilúvatar told Aule to kill the dwarves he created. But at the last minute, Ilúvatar saw Aule's heartbreak for his creations, that he allowed Aule to keep them, but they would only awaken after the elves, the first children of Ilúvatar. So Aule planted his dwarves deep into the mountains to await awakening. This is essentially Tolkien's version of the story of God and Abraham. The Vala Varda began organizing the stars and creating new stars, arranging them into constellations. And so, by the Bay of Cuivianen, on the inland sea of Helkar, under the light of the stars, the first elves awoke, which is why the elves loved the stars so much. Born into a world of turmoil, they had no idea what fate would await them. And this is where we shall leave our story for now. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon to find out when my next videos come out. Let me know what you think of this change of scene with Manny Man Does Lore, and tell me what other lore you might want to see me explore. Oh, that rhymed. You can support the creation of these videos through Patreon at patreon.com/John D Ruddy. It has been a massive support for me as an independent artist. Thank you. My live streams have not been as frequent these last few months. As you can see, my creative space is not very big at the moment. Prolonged house renovations have meant that my studio developments have been delayed too, but hopefully soon this space will change and I will have more physical and mental space to be more creative. Special welcome to my newest patrons, Will Giltrap, WSG, Dallin Wright, and Keel Adam. And thanks to all my patrons, Alexander, Arthur Revan, Arwin D, Brendan J. Cassidy, Kanku, Carl D. Mandry, Chair DJ, Chloe, Colton Sayer, David B, David Stranad, Emer Gibson, Senan, age 10, Felix Bruma, Frank Porter, Generic Pilot, Gretchen Sand, Helena RB, Jefferson Yates, Jen, Josh, Joshua Benjamin Heisler, Judy Friesen, Catherine Gilks, Kythius, Kilroy McNalsty, Cobrag 90, Lapre Shea Queen Vara, Marcus Booker, Matophobia, Mike Wise, Monday Rico, Mr. Magnificent, Mr. Research, Classy Black Men, Mr. Easy Play 2, Mycroft, Mythgwyn, Nice OJ, Oli Course, Patrick McGrath, Paul Minogue, Rocket Wrench, Ryan Ilano, Serena Kajani, Shane McDonough, Stephanie Lentz, Talitha Brower, Tanmay, Thomas Woods, Travis Dunn, Undersurf. Once again, thank you. Ba-bum.